Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching the stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing Board. And special thanks to our friend Red Access for moderating the live chat. Today's stream is going to be extremely important. I have dug into the SCO, what the SCO is about, what are the goals of the SCO, and what this meeting actually at Tianjin has achieved. For the people who are looking for answers about multipolarity, the role of Russia and China, and also the rapprochement between China and India, which will have important ramifications on the entire Eurasian region. So what are the goals and what is the importance of the SCO and what are the differences between the SCO, BRICS, SCO, the EU, SCO, NATO? I'm going to try to answer all these questions for you. I have done a lot of research. However, that doesn't mean that everything I tell you could be 100% factually correct. So if I made any errors or mistakes during this stream, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. And also, if you agree or disagree with me, please don't hesitate to share your opinion on this channel. Even if you disagree with me, we don't ban anyone unless somebody is really coming here to troll or try to smear and use all these words that don't really encourage anyone to participate in the live chat. The live chat is here for the people to engage in a conversation, to teach other people something and probably learn something in return. That's why we have also our different Red Access in the live chat. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to screen footage from the SCO meetings, and at the same time, I'm going to try to explain my opinion about this very important meeting, which is already finalized at the current moment. But picture with me this, my friends, a humid evening sky over Tianjin, the harbor lights throwing long reflections across the water, and motorcades sliding past a crowd of cameras toward a single building. Inside, leaders who don't always like each other, some who barely talk outside, carefully scripted moments, sit down at one table. No one is signing up to fight each other's wars. No one is surrendering sovereignty to a supranational parliament. Yet, they agree, at least on paper, that what will ripple from the Caucasus to the Indian Ocean. That is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in 2025, a forum that doesn't look like the institutions we're used to, but one that increasingly sets the tempo across Eurasia. I will try to make this a little bit bigger, or myself bigger, maybe that would be better. I will also try to mute this video. I think it is better if we do that. So, but the SCO, my friends, to understand why, rewind a quarter century. The SCO grew out of the Shanghai Five, a practical arrangement to demilitarize and finalize borders among China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan after the Soviet collapse. From that narrow mission, reduce friction along fragile frontiers, came a wider architecture. So by 2001, it had a name and purpose: counter the three evils of terrorism, separatism, and extremism, build habits of intelligence sharing, run exercises, nudge cross-border trade and infrastructure where it makes sense. Over time, that table, of course, expanded and it included countries like Uzbekistan, then India and Pakistan, and now recently Iran, and also Belarus, until you could look at the map and realize most of the Eurasian landmass and the vast share of its people were represented in one room. But the SCO is not a clone of the West's toolkit. NATO, for example, is a defense pact welded together by Article 5. The SCO has no such clause. The EU is a supranational legal order with a single market and a parliament. The SCO is consensus-based and stubbornly intergovernmental. BRICS is a global economic club pushing alternative finance. The SCO's center of gravity is regional security with development riding alongside. So different instruments for different jobs. NATO is supposed to deter, and nowadays this is changing, of course. The EU was supposed to integrate all these economies together. BRICS is supposed to finance and amplify. Now the SCO is supposed to coordinate security first, connectivity second, without demanding members subordinate domestic politics to a central authority, like what the EU is trying to do. In short, the SCO is not an Asian NATO, not Eurasian EU, and not BRICS with new branding. So why did Tianjin feel different this time in 2025? Because the quiet architecture beneath it, the triangle of Russia, China, and India, is clicking into one place. Think of it as RCI. So we will name Russia, China, India during this conversation with you guys RCI. What does the RCI bring to the table? So it brings commodities and defense depth from Russia, industrial scale, capital and technology from China, demography, market growth, and strategic autonomy from India. For years, outside powers tried to pry one corner off the triangle, especially by leaning into India-China border tensions, but 2025 brought a different current, a tariff shock from Washington, 50% on broad swath of Indian goods, collided with India's basic arithmetic. Growth needs affordable energy, and discounted Russian crude is hard to ignore, right? So New Delhi doubled down on its ties with Moscow and without fanfare began thawing with Beijing. For example, resuming direct flights, reopening pilgrimage access to Kailash, starting to relax some curbs on Chinese investment. This is not some sort of a romance, right? It looks to me more like a realism and realpolitik, which relies on maximize options, refuse vassalage to any camp, keep the economy humming. So that is multipolarity in practice, right? Not on slogans. It says we can be in the Quad and in the SCO, buy S-400 from Russia and cheap equipment from the West, compete with China and still run trains across the same passes. It also says something about the West's leverage. When the main tool is financial pressure, like tariffs, sanctions, secondary sanctions, the targets start building parallel circuits. De-risking from a single currency, for example, swapping in local tenders, arranging energy in one ledger, and technology in another. You can call that fragmentation. The people in the room in SCO call it insulation. At Tianjin, Xi Jinping took that mood and translated it into tools. First, what did Xi Jinping propose? He called for an SCO development bank, quote, as soon as possible. So the first thing they want to do is to establish an SCO development bank very soon, which would be a vehicle that would move projects from communiques to concrete, right? Second, he reminded the room that the combined economies of SCO countries are approaching $30 trillion. This is doesn't sound like a club at the margins, right? It looks very competitive. Third, Xi Jinping put real money on the table, $1.4 billion in loans via the SCO Interbank Consortium, plus a promise of 100 welfare projects scattered across member states. Those are visible wins, from clinics to school renovations to vocational training. Xi noted that China's cumulative investment in fellow SCO members has already cost $34 billion. And then he drew the frame. Resist bloc confrontation and harassment, keep the world order anchored in the UN, launch a new SCO center to counter emerging security challenges. If those sound like headlines, the Tianjin Declaration filled in the paragraphs. The members of the SCO condemned the strikes by Israel at the United States on Iran and rejected the attempt to revive UN Security Council sanctions against Tehran by procedural sleight of hand. They stated with unusual clarity that resolving the Palestinian question is the only path to sustainable stability in the Middle East, called for a ceasefire in Gaza and pressed for humanitarian relief, which in my opinion are not enough. All these calls and stuff, they're not going to change anything on the ground. They have to be concrete steps to enforce a ceasefire on Israel and force them to allow humanitarian relief. All these statements make no difference in my opinion. Anyways, the members of the SCO also reaffirmed support for an Afghanistan that is independent, neutral, and peaceful, no appetite for another extremely engineered experiment on that soil. Marking the 80th anniversary of victory, the SCO members warned against desecrating war monuments and graves. They agreed to work jointly on the risks of artificial intelligence, confirmed their readiness to expand military cooperation, backed the creation of a development bank, and finally endorsed reform of the United Nations to fit today's realities. So we have security, development, norms. Those are the three legs of one stool. Now, none of this works, by the way, without weight, because now we have China brings a lot into the table, right? Not just factories and ports, but research power. This is very important. Over the last decade, a Clarivate scorecard shows China published about 5.6 million research papers to America's 5.3 million research papers, with the UK at 1.7 million, Germany at 1.4 million, India at 1.3 million research papers, and the rest of the G20 trailing. That is an uncomfortable fact for those who assume an automatic Western lead in knowledge production. When a country tops research output, runs the world's largest manufacturing base, and starts underwriting development through regional institutions, gravity would eventually shift. Standards, supply chains, regulatory templates, they start bending toward the node that can fund, build, and maintain them. Does that mean the SCO is anti-West? No, of course not. The organization's own language, what it calls the Shanghai spirit, leans toward mutual benefit, respect for civilizational diversity, and non-interference. The SCO deliberately allergic to bloc logic, but the political thesis running beneath this year's summit was louder than the usual meetings in the past. They spoke about civilizational sovereignty, which matters a lot, universality claims that erase differences. They say the universality claims that erase differences will be resisted. A dollar-centric system that can be weaponized will be hedged. So three things they have reaffirmed. Civilizational sovereignty matters. Universality claims that erase differences will be resisted. And the dollar-centric system that is now weaponized by the US will be hedged. In the most pointed version of that argument, you hear something like this. The West today stands on a narrow pedestal of financialization, asset bubbles, and currency privilege guarded by firms whose power rivals that of states. If China, Russia, and India together can move a meaningful share of their trade and investment outside that system, the pedestal begins to wobble. The more cautious version says something simpler. Resilience requires redundancy. No society should be one sanction list or tariff hike away from an energy crisis or supply chain heart attack. Notice how this filters into policy. A development bank would be a place to price loans in baskets or local currencies. An interbank consortium with Chinese liquidity behind it turns memoranda into budgets. 100 welfare projects may sound today small, but they create a rhythm of cooperation that outlives any single leader's photo op today, right? A security center aimed at new challenges means fused watch lists, cyber and AI threat monitoring, and standardized emergency protocols for pipelines, ports, and data centers. You don't really need an Article 5 to make that valuable. You need a phone number that gets picked up at 3 a.m. in the morning in 4 capitals, and drills that teach brigades and border guards how to behave when the call comes. So there is a cultural and intellectual layer to this moment of the meeting at the SCO meeting. And it is easy to miss because it doesn't make headlines in the mainstream press. The call from Eurasian thinkers is to turn the tacit coordination among Putin, Xi, and Modi into a doctrine. Multipolarity not just as a diplomatic stance, but as a backbone for education, industry, finance, and geopolitics. For example, they have to teach engineers and economists a portable language of cooperation that doesn't default to one civilizational template, right? They also have to encourage universities to partner along corridor lines, power grids with physics departments, agriculture with water institutes, port with logistics school. If that sounds lofty, remember that the institutions we take for granted today began as ideas in pamphlets and seminars long before they had buildings and brass plaques. None of this guarantees, by the way, harmony between these SCO countries. India and China still have a live border dispute. Pakistan and India clash by habit. Iran's relations with the West are a minefield. Russia is at war with NATO in Ukraine. But the logic of the SCO is not that disagreements disappear. It is that disagreement is fenced in by working channels. You can run a pipeline while you argue about a pass. You can do joint custom digitization even if your foreign ministries are drafting angry notes. Central Asia is the proof of concept. Once the most fragile section of the map, it has become relatively predictable. Crossing guards more likely to stamp a tracker's paper than cock a rifle. That happened not because anyone surrendered, but because neighbors learned the cost of permanent crisis and built routines to avoid the clashes. The Europe comparison here is instructive. There is a school of thought that says if Europe had embraced a win-win relationship with Russia rather than deepening dependency on American security guarantees, NATO would be politely redundant by now. Whether you buy that or not, the SCO is operating from a different premise. No one is coming to save us. Build what you need with the neighbors you have. Keep the UN as the global convening tent, but do not wait for it to fix your border crossing or your fertilizer shortage. That is why UN reform shows up alongside AI risk in the same declaration of the SCO. One is about legitimacy and the other is about survival. Now, let's come a little bit back to India, because India nowadays is under great attack by the United States and other European countries, because Delhi made a choice in this case, and Delhi's choices are the hinge. Strategic autonomy for India is not a slogan, it's a survival instinct. Paying more for energy to please a distant ally while inflation bites and elections loom in, not a serious option. Being reduced to an appendage in someone else's containment strategy is not a serious option either. The thaw with China is calibrated, confidence building rather than concession. And the deepening with Russia is transactional rather than sentimental. That is precisely why SCO matters to India. It is the one room where you can see both Beijing and Moscow across the table. Speak the language of connectivity and counterterrorism, and leave without signing a paper that ties your hands. And what does the next phase look like after this SCO? In my opinion, we have to expect experiments. For example, we have to expect currency swaps that actually settle trade, dual ledger financing where strategic commodities move one way and capital goods the other, port digitization and ETR systems that cut border times in half, a handful of flagship projects from that list of 100 welfare commitments like clinics, water treatment, rural broadband, rolling out where the political payoff is highest. Exercises and tabletop simulations at the new security center with AI risk guidelines drafted quietly by officials who know that AI often means the malware you didn't test for. And watch the development bank file. If it launches with real capitalization and a clear pipeline, we will know the SCO is moving from forum to platform. Of course, there will be lots of backlash and lots of pushback against SCO. Sanctions designation and tariff spats are not going away. Some European leaders will default to transatlantic alignment even when it costs them. Commentators will call every SCO meeting a talk shop and every communique a repeat. And yet, if you're sitting in a control room somewhere between the Black Sea and the Bay of Bengal, the map looks different than it did 10 years ago, right? Rail spines have been laid, pipelines rerouted, data centers built, universities partners, customs officers trained. We tend to measure power in missiles and GDP. The SEO measures it in the unglamorous things that make neighbors dependable: a working switchboard, a standard form, a bridge that doesn't collapse in spring. It is worth acknowledging, in my opinion, the undertow of values asserted at Tianjin. Condemning strikes on Iran and calling for a Gaza ceasefire isn't just posture. It is a bid to reclaim moral language from a narrative that paints some civilian lives as expendable and some as sacred. Insisting on respect for war graves is a small thing that signals a large point about memory and dignity. Calling for UN reform in the same breath as caution as AI says, or the translation, the world is changing faster than the rules that govern it. Either we update the rules together or we will live with a patchwork of emergency measures. So, here is the simplest way to think about it. The SCO is a nervous system of Eurasia, not a spine, not a single command center, but a mesh that lets signal travel. Threat reports, credit lines, engineering standards, ceasefire language. The RCI, Russia, China, India triangle, comes with Russia's resources, China's industry and research engine, India's growth and autonomy. Those anchor that mesh. China's research lead and financing tools give it special weight. But without India's options and Russia's endurance, the mesh sags, right? And outside powers, especially those who rely on financial coercion, will find that a world of meshes is harder to bully than a world of blocks. If you came, my friends, tonight expecting an us versus them, evil versus good frame, the story of Tianjin offers something subtler. It is about the slow, steady work of neighbors dedicating they will not be trapped in other people's rivalries, that they will build the tools to live with their disagreements and still move goods, energy, data, and people across mountains and deserts. It is about a development bank that doesn't yet exist, a security center whose phone numbers are being programmed into the right handsets, a research engine that is already shaping standards, and a set of leaders who understand that ideology, multipolarity, civilizational sovereignty only matters if it can pour concrete, wire clinics, price loans, and keep the lights on. That's the map without new borders. It is messier than the Cold War and less theatrical than symmetry in a seaside resort. But if you squint at the horizon over Tianjin, the cranes, the trains, the quiet chum of commerce, you can see the outline of a different world coming into focus. One built not on the promise of protection, but on a habit of cooperation. And for the first time in a long time, the habit is forming in a room where rivals choose to keep sitting down. Now, I will move a little bit to Europe, because what is happening in Europe and with Ursula von der Leyen is really worth noticing in this case. I think what she posts nowadays on X is hilarious, because while you see Tianjin was busy turning coordination into banks, projects, and a security nerve center, Europe was busy turning language into weaponry. Picture another border. This time, the forests and fences between Poland and Belarus, cameras click, the wind carries the thud of armored trucks from some distant exercise. Ursula von der Leyen steps up to a microphone and without nuance offers a zoology lesson. She says, quote, "Putin has not changed and will not change. He is a predator. Only," she says, "a strong deterrence can keep him in check." assuring Poles of full European solidarity from a podium set up on the frontier. Days around that tour, she sketched out pretty precise plans for deploying European troops to Ukraine as part of post-war guarantees and pushed for more money, more reviews, more speed in rearming the European Union. The Commission is now talking about 6 monthly scorecards on member state defense spending and has already lined up a giant loans for arms facility. The subtext lands like a snare drum. Europe will be measured by how many shells it buys, how fast it moves brigades, how tightly it bolts itself to NATO logistics. Her social media feeds now read like a NATO press office. Just go to her account and see yourself on X. It's all about generals, kit, hazard tape graphics. You scroll and half expect the next post to be a munition unboxing. The old European promise, prosperity plus social protection is being repackaged as security above all. When elites can no longer promise rising living standards, they promise safety. War becomes the new glue. The budget becomes the message. And every euro that clicks into an artillery line item is a euro that doesn't fix a hospital roof, fund social housing, or insulate a school before next summer. The reply is ready-made. We would love to do it for you, but Russia is going to attack us soon. And the winners in this are Rheinmetall, Dassault, Thales, Leonardo, Navantia, all these arms companies, plus the liquefied natural gas crowd selling Europe its own strategic anxiety at a markup. And the losers are going to be the workers and households who are asked to swallow austerity again. The debt-strained South told to tighten belts while the North sell its armor and audits. Eastern Europe pushes against maximalistic hawkishness, and Western Europe hedges and worries. Elites demand militarization and virtue, public fidget at the bill. It's a Cold War remake without the prosperity that once cushioned the fear. This time, the script reads guns instead of butter, not alongside it. So play the tape forward and none of the endings are tidy. Fortress NATO Europe that outsources politics to procurement, a two-speed union where the rich core retools and the periphery trims clinics to buy drones. A backlash crisis when the arms bubble stalls, leaving warehouses full and budgets bare. Von der Leyen's war feed declares unity. The lived reality is more fractured lines, north versus south, east versus west, elite versus people, drawn with the hard pencil of procurement schedules. And her predator rhetoric, it lands like a cartoon speech bubble on a very real frontier, brash, flattening, allergic to complicity. While the bill for the new identity project comes due in school closures, postponed rail upgrades, and another winter of energy anxiety. Glue, poured too thick, can crack the vase it is meant to hold together. Europe is being remade around war, not prosperity. This, in my opinion, is not going to bring stability. It's going to bring a lot more fragile times for Europe and abroad. This is what happened, all in all, in SCO, and this is unfortunately where the EU is heading. And today I had to go and scroll into Ursula von der Leyen's X feed, and I found it like she is a marketing manager, basically, for arms sales and how much ammunition they have to secure and how many shells they have to build in countries like Estonia, Finland, the Baltic countries. This is an anxiety they are deliberately spreading among European countries by creating the Russian boogeyman, which is, in my opinion, a typical imperial approach to countries where they rely on the fear of the other. The empires basically need an enemy, an outside enemy. If it's not Russia, they have to have another enemy. And previously, I'm going to be very honest with you, they have tried to fill their budgets and the corporation through the pandemic when the corona hit. All the measures they have taken, they were based on finances and economies and not on public health, including the vaccines that they have sold. And I'm not discussing the content of the vaccine. I'm not talking about the efficacy and all this stuff just for YouTube not to be sensitive about it. I'm talking about the solutions they have presented to the people, including the lockdowns, including closing the schools, including the digitization of the infrastructure, basically, and also the push for pharmaceutical products in where the Ursula von der Leyen had a direct role in it. She was accused she's accused of corruption and having a back channel communication with Pfizer to secure buying and selling basically millions of jabs to the people. And that was mostly based on pushing the anxiety and the fear of the virus itself. Whether you believe that this virus was deadly or not, that's completely irrelevant. I'm talking about the push for anxiety through the media outlets, through all the advertisement that we have seen on TV, in newspapers, on social media platforms, and silencing the people who spoke against it raises lots of questions. Why did they rely on this approach of fear-mongering and spreading anxiety among the people? Because from a social science perspective, psychologically speaking, many people act even irrationally when they are faced with existential threat. So if you impose on the people the notion that a virus is going to kill everyone or going to kill your parents, then you force them into abiding by certain regulations that they are imposing on the people, and these regulations serve them. And in the same way, this Russia invasion narrative that if after Ukraine, Russia will invade Poland and march towards Poland, this is exactly the same script of fear-mongering the people, but this time based on security. That there is this Russian enemy which has occupied probably quarter of Ukraine, and they will march and occupy the entirety of it and probably the Baltic countries and then Poland, and they're going to revive the Soviet Union. This speech is directed at the local population in Europe. It's not directed at Russia, because Russia is not preparing for war against the Baltic countries, let alone against Poland, NATO countries, and against Germany. That's completely irrational. Even Russia doesn't have the financial means and the military means to occupy the entire Europe. They can attack European countries if they want to use missiles or they want to use, let's say, tactical nuclear weapons, like we see every day. There are speculations about it. But occupying Europe through the Russian army is completely irrational thing to say, especially when we compare the argument of the people who say two things that are both of them are opposing each other, but they can put it in the same sentence and sell it to the people as this is a fact, that Ukraine is winning the war and Russia is incapable of defeating Ukraine, but at the same time Russia is preparing for a war against other European countries. Therefore, any logical person, any person with a minimum understanding of how the politicians try to manipulate their own people into accepting certain measures that are very unpopular and controversial, you have to push this fear and anxiety on them in order for them to act on their fear and accept these measures that go against their interests. Look, when I was following some of the statements of former foreign minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, and she was asked about how Germany is going to finance all these billions in Ukraine, and she was very honest about it, that the some of the funding is going to come from the public, the finances of the public infrastructure, such as the schooling, such as the railway and the public transport, right? So imagine a situation where Europe, at the current moment, without this extra militarization and super spending on the militaries and defense budgets, etc., it's already quite very expensive for ordinary people. I'm not talking about just the elite. The elite are not even 1% of the country. But the country overall is not in a good economic shape. And when you go to the supermarket and you buy stuff and compare them 3 years ago, you will find a stark difference in the prices. And if you want to eat even healthier, like go and buy some bio food, etc., it will cost you a fortune to live, right? And if somebody is making, let's say, 2,000 euro netto, which is after paying the taxes, it's only enough for one person. So somebody has to make at least 4,000 euro per month to feed a family in Germany, minimum there, right? And under such circumstances, if there is going to be expenditure on the defense and the military, and the production in Germany is not increasing because of, or let's say, many factories have closed in Germany, and the production is no longer as competitive as it used to be. And also the products are way more expensive because the energy resources are now more expensive. They no longer buy from Russia. So what we expect in the future is a double-fold inflation and double-fold expensiveness, at least in Germany. And of course, in other countries, as is Germany, the most important industrial country in Europe. So imagine what about other countries. So what I'm trying to say here, guys, is I'm in favor of multipolarism, at least now as an experiment, whether through SCO or a combination of SCO BRICS, because the people need to have an alternative way to first cooperate, interact between each other, and build their countries, especially their infrastructure, without political bullying. This is the unfortunate truth about the unipolarity that is based on US hegemony over their allies and over the rivals, right? And the US hegemony comes also with the dollar monopoly, the weaponization of the dollar through the sanctions. That imagine that you are dealing with the world with a dollar, and the US doesn't like your domestic or foreign policy, and then they impose sanctions on you, and you cannot deal with the dollar with the outside world, or you cannot purchase products from the outside world because the US is imposing these type of measures. Therefore, especially in the developing countries, they will look for alternative markets and alternative systems to cooperate with the world and also develop in their own countries. There are so many countries that are unfortunately underdeveloped nowadays, yes, because of the corruption in their countries and the mismanagement of the planning and so many other things. Some of them are cultural, some of them are religious, some of them are the crisis inside these countries. But when you have a big country like China coming as the investor, when you have a big a country like India with all its labor power, right? And when you're coming also with Russia, when Russia is coming with its military industrial base, those three countries can complement each other. And if these countries cooperate together through investment and cooperation with other developing countries, these developing countries will accept them, because the alternative is for them are the powers which colonized them in the past, and recently they have adopted this neo-colonial approach against them by sucking their resources through the multinational corporations, like they are doing now in Syria. They say Syria is free in the mainstream press, but Syria is completely under occupation. It's a financial occupation, it's a geopolitical occupation, it's a political occupation, it's an occupation on different layers, but most importantly, it's an economic occupation, because once the regime is gone, and the central government has collapsed and the military is destroyed, then there is no power in the country that can establish sovereignty. And once you lose your sovereignty, the neo-colonialists come, and those are these multinational corporations, and they come and invest in your country. They build your airports, they extract your oil, and they bring investments here. But what you get in return is complete dependency on them, to the extent that they could impose their political conditions on you. One example of this is that you no longer own the right to extract your own carbohydrates, for example, because the Americans are the ones who brought this government into power, and they have brokered lots of deals with them in order to bring them back into the international community. Therefore, you see that the US, under such circumstances, was able to impose a lot of strategic concessions from the current ruling regime in Damascus, including things that was unimaginable only a few months ago, right? Like normalizing ties with Israel, and talking about Syria as a land of that will never pose any security threat on the Zionist state, and they will cut ties with Hezbollah, and they will kick out the Palestinian factions. They used to say about Syria that it is the beating heart of Arabism and resistance, etc. And now it is the beating heart of compliance, beating heart of becoming a collaborator, and also basically pushing the history of Syria under the rug. But what I'm trying to say is, in the past, they used to send the missionaries, they used to send their soldiers, they used to send their bases, they used to send their navies to occupy your country. Now they don't need to do all these things. They can do it simply through the economic means, by investing in your country, putting all the economy, pushing, like intertwining and making your economy dependent on the US and the other Western governments. And then if you misbehave, they have already invested a lot in your country that they can blackmail you and even pull the rug under your feet and bring someone else. In the case of SCO, it's quite clear that one of the main foundations of the SCO and also the BRICS are the respect for other people's cultures and the differences with other people, and the sovereignty of other nations, and the non-interference in the domestic affairs. Many countries are complaining against the West, saying like, guys, you are coming and you want to make business with us, but you're coming with set of demands, diktats, and you want to impose your so-called values on us. We don't like your values. We don't like your culture. We don't want to adopt your culture. Maybe there are some aspects of it that we like, but we don't want to impose this, right, on our people. Yesterday, I was walking through one of the streets here, and I was really shocked to see the transgender flag over church here in Berlin. And see, I'm not against trans people at all. Everybody is free to do whatever they want with their lives. But a trans flag over a church, basically, it goes against the Christian values. So if this is what the values look like in the West, many countries around the world do not want to do this. So they say, we don't want your imposed cultural lifestyle on us. We have different culture here, we have convictions, we have different religions, and our societies are not accepting this. In my opinion, were it not for the imposed cultural engineering of this type of lifestyles, let's say, which is imposed on the people, if you say anything, you are sidelined from the society. Many people would have pushed against it or said, don't come after my kids, don't come after my church, right? Those are the basic things, basically, in my opinion. Like, the church has to be a sacred place for praying and for believing in the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Bible. But in the Bible, I don't see anywhere where they would accept transgenderism and many other things that come with it. And the same goes with Islam. That's why Islam, in Islamic countries, this is completely different, let's say, because they believe in the religion and they follow it strictly. But many societies in the West, they have forgotten about Christian values. and they're not applying them, basically. Many people are leaving the church and they believe in other things, which is completely fine. I'm not against anyone. What I'm saying is don't come after the church and don't come after the kids. And this is what other countries are trying to tell the West, that we are unique nations, we have our civilization, and we don't want to adopt your today's whatever you're believing in. We're not on the same boat. And this is why, despite the, how to say it, the West portrays itself as democratic. So let's suppose those are democracies, just for an argument's sake, and the East, the bloc of SCO and others, supposedly they are the authoritarianism, right? Many countries would prefer to deal with authoritarian regimes as long as they're respecting their way of life and respecting their sovereignty, over dealing with democracies, which brings them more headache and imposing on them this cultural agenda and also their financial and geopolitical agenda, right? So if the SCO, in my opinion, is going to be relevant in the world stage, sooner or later, they have to realize that this interconnectivity that they're trying to establish, that economic integration between these countries, they will bring more trust. You remember when we spoke about with Tarek, our dear friend Tarek, trust doesn't come at the beginning of the negotiations. Trust comes at the end of the rapprochement, and the rapprochement is a long process of negotiations, talks, etc. So this process of rapprochement between China and India is very important in my opinion, and Russia is playing an instrumental role in it. They don't have to, they're not asking India to abandon the West, they're just asking for India to continue dealing with them, and they can diversify their relationship with the West as well. But what I'm trying to say is, if in the future, which is still early to speak about it, if in the future they have to become relevant in terms of imposing new realities in the global scene. So we're not only speaking about cooperation between these countries, but collectively bringing change on the international scene. Then they need to have certain level of Jacobian tools, which means to enforce for example, when they speak about ceasefire agreement in Gaza, right? How are they going to impose that? Which I said it's just an ink on paper. They need to have Jacobian tools to enforce their will on the US and the European side, who are blocking this ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Because today is Gaza, tomorrow is Lebanon. Tomorrow is Lebanon, the other day, the next is Iraq. Then is Egypt. This is not going to end. Today I watched a short clip for Tom Bavak, the US Special Envoy to the region in the Middle East and the ambassador in Turkey. And he says the following, that after October 7, the calculations in Israel have changed. And now Israel sees itself in a post-Sykes-Picot era, which divided the region into different countries based on the colonialists' wishes. Now he says that this era is over in the eyes of Israel, and what they're looking forward is to do whatever is necessary inside the Israeli borders and outside the Israeli borders. They will do anything and everything to protect their country against any sort of evil. This is what he said. What this means, Israel has a carte blanche from the US to go after any state and non-state actor in the region and abroad if they deem that necessary. This is something that is very important for me, because many people continue saying that the US and Israel are separate nations, and that Israel is dictating what the US wants, and that Israel is in charge of the United States. I think that the Israeli lobby is very strong in the United States, but the US and Israel are acting as two bodies, as two parts of the same body, of the same imperial body. I cannot in any reasonable way remove Israel from the US and claim that Israel is acting independently in the region. No, there is a big harmony and intermarriage between Zionism, the neoconservatives, the military-industrial complex, the bankers, now the Silicon Valley, including Elon Musk. You see, everyone is in the same camp, is in the Zionist and neocon camp. They are all against Venezuela. They are all against Iran. They were all against Syria. They are all against Palestinians. They're all together in this. So I truly hope that I am able to explain myself correctly on this case, that you cannot separate between the US and Israel when it comes to these strategic files. On the other hand, the countries in SCO, BRICS, and others, they haven't found any formula to protect multipolarity yet. And protecting multipolarity should include protecting the persecuted people, the people under occupation and people under colonialism. Like, you can invest in Africa and convince the Africans that the Chinese investments are bringing good for them, and their government start dealing with China instead of dealing with the United States and elsewhere. However, I don't know why this person says why. Oh my, is Kevork defending Brian Barletik's talking point? I didn't even see his episode, to be honest with you, but I like him. So if the Chinese are able to persuade and convince the, let's say, independent African nations to deal with them through investments and bringing them bridges, schools, water dams, electricity generators, etc., they have to find a way to free the persecuted people who don't have independent political entities to deal with China independently. Like, where is the Palestine government? There is no Palestine government, right? Mahmoud Abbas is a collaborator scum. And Hamas and Jihad in Gaza, in this small enclave, which is completely destroyed, even if they were independent, they're not going to be able to deal with China alone. So there has to be a way also to liberate the people under colonial occupation. If we are really speaking about a multipolar world, that should also include freeing the people in these persecuted countries from occupation. And it doesn't have to be military, by the way. If they're talking about reforming the UN, there has to be a way to vote for such cases, or at least you need to have 2 vetoes on such sensitive cases, such as ceasefire. When the case is about a genocide case, which the ICJ says it's plausible, then one country cannot veto a ceasefire agreement. That's completely absurd and unfair and unjust for everyone in Palestine and abroad. So that would be my closing statement, and that is, all these parallel organizations are very important for the people who and for the nations who are part of it. However, there has to be a formula, there has to be a strategy for these countries to develop in the future in order to bring the people who are under occupation of the colonial powers into their camp, through enabling their survival and resilience, basically. And I'm not calling for like arms and battles. If there was a ceasefire agreement and establishment of a Palestine state, the least to say, the Palestinians would have definitely picked the SCO and the BRICS side to develop their country, but they're not able to have that opportunity to decide to begin with because they're under occupation. So this would be my last point. Unfortunately, I was not able to read all the comments, guys, today, because at the beginning I had to read the script that I prepared for you about the SCO. I know that it has included lots of details, technicalities, and some of the things that don't sound fancy. And it's not about, oh my God, look, the East has beaten the West, or the West is crumbling, and all this stuff that other channels are doing. I don't want to do that, and just wanted to really bring what is important and essential in this case. Some ask him about Indonesia. No need to apologize. SCO is a big deal as long as with Chinese. So Just trying to see if there was any fight in the comments below. I don't see any. So guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's stream. I really appreciate all of you. Before leaving this stream, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share this video with your friends if you think they are interested in this. And thank you so much, our dear friend Red Access, for moderating the live chat. Just for you to know, this week is going to be till Thursday. So on Friday, I'm not able to do a live streaming. And starting next week, I will do 2 live streams. I don't know what days are they. Friday is always fixed with our different topic. But the one before that, I don't know exactly when. I will definitely plan it, and you will know on YouTube, because I will be on a vacation to rest for 2 weeks. And after that, when I come back to the 5 streams, but during the vacation I will do only 2 streams. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. If you like this content and you would like to support my independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And if you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.